Here's something you might not know. There is a theory that the Tomb of Gilgamesh was actually discovered over 2 decades ago, a secret some would rather keep buried. Today, we are diving into this intriguing possibility, a potential archaeological bombshell that hasn't quite exploded, but that's just the beginning. We'll also be taking a look at other fascinating ancient mysteries, including the curious case of the planet Ummo and the puzzling Davenport Tablets. Get ready to uncover some of history's most persistent secrets. The Tomb of Gilgamesh. One of the most ancient heroes in the world may have been a real person. Was Gilgamesh just a story or a real king? A new discovery raises the possibility that we're about to find out. The Epic of Gilgamesh has been around for thousands of years. It is a story of adventure, heroes, friendship, battles against mythical creatures, and the quest for immortality. It's incredible that this story still resonates with us today, even though it is so old. Our hero Gilgamesh is just a character in a story, right? Maybe not. After centuries of speculation, archaeologists believe they have discovered the actual Tomb of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is believed to have been a historical king of the Sumerian city-state of Uruk, likely ruling during the early dynastic period. Over time, his legacy transformed into myth, and he became a central figure in Mesopotamian legends with his epic story written on cuneiform tablets. The ancient city of Uruk is now located in present-day southern Iraq. Uruk was one of the first cities of humanity ever, a hub of innovation, monumental architecture, and the development of writing. It was also home to the famous mythical King Gilgamesh, who was said to have been laid to rest by the Euphrates River. In 2003, BBC News reported that German archaeologists had found an anomaly in the ground that could be the lost grave of King Gilgamesh himself. The problem was that during that time, the world was at war and the US had invaded Iraq, leaving the team with no choice but to leave. Jörg Fassbinder of the Bavarian Office for Historic Monuments in Munich said tests at the site of the ancient city of Uruk had shown elements of some kind of structure. He said it could be the grave. It was in the right location for it. The structure was found on a now dried up part of the Euphrates River, and it was the only place they scanned that had some sort of building. Mr. Fassbinder grabbed the world's attention, but then he said, "Don't get too excited." They definitely found something, but if it turns out to be the actual Tomb of Gilgamesh, that would be too good to be true. The team on the ground used a magnetometer, which can detect man-made objects under the soil and reveal remnants of structures. Unfortunately, with the way things were going, the team was unable to finish their research and got the heck out of there. Partial mapping of Uruk has confirmed many of the details in the Epic of Gilgamesh, showing that much of it was based on reality. Just how much is hard to say. One part of the epic tells the story of a devastating flood that has been linked to the biblical story of Noah's Ark. That's how far back this story goes. But it's still not clear if the demigod Gilgamesh ever lived. Ricardo Eichmann of the German Archaeological Institute said this discovery was just speculation. The anomaly found by the technology could be anything really, but it did get our attention. If we are ever able to definitively prove that Gilgamesh was a real person, it would be like proving King Arthur of Camelot really existed. The mythical lines are blurred with these, but it wouldn't be the first time myth has turned into reality. For a long time, the Xia dynasty, the first dynasty in traditional Chinese history, was considered by many scholars to be just a myth. The land of Punt was also believed to be a mythical place. But thanks to archaeological discoveries, these legends were confirmed to be real. Do you want to hear a crazy story? In 2003, word got out of the discovery of this anomaly and that archaeologists had found the real Tomb of Gilgamesh. It was just as lavish and extraordinary as the tomb of Tutankhamun, filled with gold and statues, artwork, coffins, artifacts, texts. It was unbelievable. But then suddenly, the discovery was gone. All media reports ceased. Soon after, the US invaded Iraq looking for something. Not weapons, but the secrets hidden in the Tomb of Gilgamesh. Conspiracy theorists started to believe that there may be legendary weapons, the secrets of humanity's origins, or even extraterrestrial tech hidden in his tomb, and the war was just a cover-up. At the same time, while Iraq was in chaos, Something equally strange was happening thousands of miles away in Romania's Bucegi Mountains. A team of researchers discovered a massive underground complex filled with bizarre tunnels, unexplainable artifacts, and symbols that looked eerily similar to Sumerian inscriptions. The hidden complex also contained impossible technology, such as a force field that initially prevented anyone from entering it. Once inside, the team found holographic technology that displayed the history of Earth. The Romanian government, along with the US, supposedly locked the site down faster than you can say ancient alien conspiracy. The details are sketchy, but so are the details surrounding Area 51, and that place is real. People started asking, could there be a connection between Gilgamesh's tomb, the invasion of Iraq, and the Bucegi Mountains complex? Both discoveries happened in 2003. Both involve ancient, mysterious structures, massive underground tombs, and bizarre Sumerian-like carvings. Both discoveries got shut down very quickly, almost as if someone didn't want the world poking around in humanity's forgotten past. Some theorists believe Gilgamesh may have been more than just a king, maybe a demigod, or maybe a being not from this world. The Bucegi complex, with its alleged high-tech remnants, might have something to do with Gilgamesh's origins. What do you think? Would this be a great premise for a sci-fi novel? Is it too ridiculous? Could these sites hold clues to an ancient civilization far more advanced than anyone thought? Let me know what you think in the comments. The professional thugs of ancient India. If you've ever watched Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, you probably remember the terrifying cult that worshipped Kali, sacrificed humans, and stole village children. Scary, right? Well, that nightmarish villainy has roots in reality. The cultists from the fictional film were inspired by the real thuggies. They were less about magical heart-yanking and more about good old-fashioned strangulation and robbery. For centuries, these shadowy criminals prowled India's highways, befriending travelers before sending them on a one-way trip to the afterlife. Their reign of terror was so effective that it took the full force of the British Empire to put an end to it. The thuggies were the world's deadliest con artists. These weren't your average pickpockets or street thugs. Operating from the 14th to the 19th centuries, they targeted travelers across northern and central India, particularly on the well-trodden highways of the Ganges Plains. The thuggies' business model was simple. Pretend to be friendly, gain your trust, and then kill you and take all your stuff. Their preferred method was up close and personal. They liked strangulation with a rumal, a knotted handkerchief they all carried like some kind of homicidal scout badge. It was quiet, efficient, and made it look like the victim had died of natural causes. Joining the gang required commitment. Recruits underwent a rigorous initiation process, swore loyalty to the cult, and pledged to commit murder and robbery in the name of their dark profession. Everything was going great for these criminal overlords until the English had had enough. William Henry Sleeman was the British officer who made it his mission to hunt down the thuggies and get rid of them for good. Sleeman led aggressive campaigns to dismantle the cult, gather intelligence, track members, and convince former thuggies to snitch. Nothing ends a secret society faster than loose lips. The turning point came in 1836 with the Thuggee and Dacoity Suppression Act, which made being a thuggie a punishable crime. With the help of informants, the British arrested and prosecuted thousands of thuggies, officially putting their murderous enterprise out of business. There's something else you need to know. Many thuggies claimed they weren't just thieves. They were divinely sanctioned assassins. According to them, they were carrying out the will of the goddess Kali, the same one from the Indiana Jones movie. They claimed that by serving Kali, they were preventing her from unleashing chaos on humanity. You have to appease the evil gods or they will unleash hell. Weirdly enough, after the thuggies were all gone, World War I started, and then World War II. And now the news seems to think we're steamrolling into World War III. Coincidence? Maybe. And now for a quick break because it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Duke the dog for the super thanks. It really means a lot, and we wouldn't be here without you. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. The Davenport Tablets. What happens when a preacher turns into an archaeologist? You get the Davenport Tablets. In the late 19th century, archaeology in America was the wild, wild west. A mix of serious scholars, amateur treasure hunters, and straight-up fraudsters. On January 10, 1877, a local preacher turned archaeologist named Reverend Jacob Gass was digging up burial mounds near Davenport, Iowa. He stumbled upon 3 slate tablets with what looked like ancient inscriptions on them. No, it wasn't Harappan or Sumerian, but that would have been cool. Instead, the tablets seemed to be written in some unknown script unlike anything ever found in North America. It looked like the Reverend had dug up proof that the ancient mound builders of Iowa were not indigenous Native Americans. The mound builders were from a mysterious, unknown, lost civilization instead. This was huge news at the time, especially because many scholars refused to believe that Native Americans were capable of building the large and complex earthworks found throughout the Midwest, and even less that they were capable of writing. There was an extremely racist ideology shared among European scholars. It was the same story as when European archaeologists found megalithic ruins in Africa. No way, they said, Africans couldn't have built these cities. And so they attributed the cities to some unknown mystery culture. In reality, it was the Africans, and the mounds in Iowa were built by Native Americans. Scholars know that today, but in 1877, they refused to believe it. Gass's tablets acted as the smoking gun for the ancient lost race theory. Too bad for Gass, nobody liked him. His smoking gun was nothing but smoke and mirrors. If you're going to be a fraudster, make sure people like you. You have to be charming and charismatic. Gass was despised by scholars at the Davenport Academy of Natural Sciences, now the Putnam Museum. He had a suspiciously good track record of finding valuable artifacts, while the Academy's own digs usually turned up nothing but dirt and disappointment. The Academy's old-school archaeologists were sour at Gass for his impossible good luck finding random artifacts, so they cooked up a plan. They planted fake tablets in a burial mound, knowing that Gass would dig them up and fall for the trap. They would expose Gass as a fraud and discredit all of his previous discoveries. But things didn't go as planned. The fake tablets became the Davenport Tablets. The prank went viral, 1877 style. Scholars worldwide tried and failed to translate the mysterious script, and it only built more intrigue. For a solid decade, the tablets fascinated the public. They were cited in academic papers, Gass became famous, and they were hailed as a groundbreaking find. The Academy couldn't really come forward and say they actually had just created fake tablets and left them as a prank. Then they would lose all the credibility. It wasn't until 1885 that the tide turned and most scholars declared the tablets a hoax. But somehow, a few stragglers kept citing them in papers until 1978, almost 100 years later. Around that time, Marshall McCusick, a historian at the University of Iowa, proved the tiles were modified roof tiles from a nearby brothel. One of the most famous archaeological discoveries in Iowa's history is in reality a bunch of roofing tiles from the old Slate House, a local business of ill repute. All these years later, there are still people who believe wholeheartedly in the Davenport Tablets, not because they trust in Reverend Gass, but because they believe that North America was home to an advanced civilization thousands of years before the Native Americans arrived. Planet Ummo, the War of the Worlds. You may not have heard of the planet Ummo, but trust me, it is a wild ride full of mysterious letters, suspicious science, and a space cult that sounds straight out of a 1960s sci-fi B-movie. This is not an episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000. The story goes like this. Somewhere in the Virgo constellation is a planet called Ummo. In the 1960s, a bunch of people started getting mysterious letters, supposedly from extraterrestrials known as the Ummites. These weren't your run-of-the-mill, take-us-to-your-leader kind of messages. These were lengthy, hyper-detailed documents filled with pseudo-scientific jargon that made even the nerdiest physicists scratch their heads. The messages primarily went to UFO enthusiasts and esoteric groups, the people most likely to lose their minds over interstellar pen pals. The movement, known as Ummoism, gained a following in Spain and France, where people took it seriously enough to spark mainstream media attention. Enter José Luis Jordán Peña, a Spanish guy who saw a spaceship in Madrid in 1966. It was an enormous circular object with 3 legs and a bizarre symbol on its underside. Soon after the sighting, anonymous letters and photographs of the same craft started appearing in the mailboxes of UFO enthusiasts. And before you could say extraterrestrial fan club, a Spanish man named Fernando Sesma Manzano started receiving long-winded, typewritten messages from the Ummites. The letters discussed deep scientific concepts like network theory, astrophysics, evolution, and magnetohydrodynamics. And no, I didn't make that up. Some people, like French researcher Jean-Pierre Petit, claimed the letters contained groundbreaking scientific ideas that inspired real-world research. Others, like historian Mike Dash, pointed out that while the letters were more sophisticated than your average UFO hoax, they weren't exactly Einstein-level breakthroughs. More like something you would find in a well-researched sci-fi novel from the 1960s. One of the quirkiest aspects of Ummoism is the so-called Ummite language. Researchers like Antonio Rivera and Jean Pollon compiled lexicons of words used by the Ummites. Pollon even came up with a concept called sonceps, a term he coined for the idea that each letter in the Ummite language carried meaning, like some kind of alien Scrabble game. Others, however, thought this was just a bunch of overcomplicated nonsense. Mainstream scientists argued that the odd spellings were probably typos or translation errors. The truth is that no one could agree on whether Ummo is a real planet full of aliens or just a fantasy. Then, decades after the excitement wore out, José Luis, the guy who saw the UFO in '66, said he lied. He insisted that he wrote the letters, faked the evidence, and kicked off Ummoism as a giant hoax. He rickrolled the scientific community for the fun of it. That's what he said anyway, but he could be lying. At the end of the day, Ummo is either one of the greatest UFO hoaxes of all time or one of the weirdest alien encounters ever. What do you believe? Let me know your thoughts. India's secret megacity. You won't believe this. Mesopotamia has Gilgamesh, but India has the forgotten city of Dholavira. And researchers have just proved this place was way more advanced than we ever thought possible. Dholavira is more than just an archaeological site. It's a window into a civilization that flourished thousands of years ago. Located in the arid landscape of Gujarat, India, this ancient city was a key part of the Harappan civilization, one of the world's earliest urban cultures. While much of the world was still struggling with the basics of organized living, Dholavira had already evolved into a thriving metropolis. People in other regions were smashing rocks together to make fire, and these people were building a utopian society. The site itself was discovered in 1967 by archaeologist Jagat Pati Joshi, unveiling a lost city hidden beneath the sands. Covering an impressive 250 acres, Dholavira ranks among the largest and most significant Harappan sites in India. Just like the ancient Uruk in Mesopotamia, Dholavira was meticulous with its building techniques. They even used a grid plan like we do today. They didn't even do that in the Middle Ages. I mean, have you seen the chaos of old European cities? One of Dholavira's most astonishing achievements is its sophisticated water management system. In an unforgiving environment where water was scarce, the city's inhabitants developed advanced methods to collect, store, and distribute water. They also had excellent sanitation systems, making them more advanced than their Mesopotamian counterparts. At least in that aspect. Think about it. This city was built on a grid with sewers and clean water. I think modern city planners could learn something from these extinct people. They standardized measurements and weights and measures across many cities in the Indus Valley civilization. Dholavira's layout reflects a society that valued order, efficiency, and communal living. It was a blueprint that would influence future urban developments. One of the most intriguing mysteries of Dholavira is its writing, which remains undeciphered to this day. Inscriptions found at the site are among the longest examples of Harappan/Indus Valley civilization writing, but it can't be decoded. Scholars continue to work on unlocking the meaning behind this script, but all attempts have failed spectacularly. Maybe AI can help. To be honest, the Harappan script is one of the biggest mysteries in archaeology right now. If and when it's finally deciphered, history will be changed forever. Imagine being able to read what they left behind. Look at everything we know about ancient Egypt because we were able to translate hieroglyphs. Despite its remarkable achievements, De La Vera's golden age came to an end just like all the other ancient civilizations. Environmental changes, including shifts in river patterns and climate, likely contributed to its downfall. The depletion of resources and evolving trade dynamics may have further strained the city's ability to thrive. While scientists are still trying to figure it out, De La Vera's decline serves as a stark reminder of the delicate balance between human societies and their environments. The Tomb of Kazanlak. I can't believe the Romans got all the attention when their neighbors in Thrace were just as exciting, maybe even more so. There is no better example of how incredible the Thracian people were than the Tomb of Kazanlak, an amazing archaeological site nestled near the town of Kazanlak in central Bulgaria. Discovered in 1944, this ancient marvel offers a rare glimpse into the rich cultural heritage of the Thracians, a civilization that flourished in the Balkans from around 4000 BC until the Roman conquest in the 1st century AD. That is a long, long lifespan. How many cultures last for 4,000 consecutive years? The tomb itself was built about 2,400 years ago. It's also not alone, but part of a larger necropolis, undoubtedly used as a final resting place for Thracian nobility. The tomb is most famous for its stunning frescoes, which are among the finest examples of Thracian artwork. At the heart of the burial chamber, vibrant murals depict a noble Thracian couple engaged in a ceremonial feast, chatting and eating just like we do today. Can't get more relatable than that. Beyond its artistic brilliance, the Tomb of Kazanlak is an architectural masterpiece. Its design includes a narrow passageway leading to a round burial chamber crowned with a beehive-shaped dome, known as a tholos. This construction is similar to Mycenaean tombs found in Greece. The walls are meticulously assembled from finely cut stone blocks without the use of mortar. Now that's impressive. The corbelled dome, an ingenious weight distribution method, has kept the structure intact despite the passage of centuries. All of this art, all of this architecture from a culture the Romans condemned to slavery and extinction. Remember Spartacus? He was a Thracian. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if the Thracians cast the first stone instead of Rome. How different would the world be today? Message in a bottle. What do you suppose is the weirdest thing ever found on a Viking ship? If you guessed a message in a bottle, you're absolutely right. But who wrote the message, and how could that have even been your first guess? In 1874, a Norwegian archaeologist named Anders Lorange was out doing what every adventurous young academic dreams of. He was digging up Viking stuff. Newly appointed as the first archaeologist and conservator at the Bergen Museum, Lorange was on a mission to make history. And he did, kind of. His most famous dig took him to Myklebost Garden, where he discovered the charred remains of the largest Viking ship ever found in Norway. That alone should have been enough to cement his legacy, but Lorange really wanted to make sure people remembered him. So he left a message in a bottle, stashing it secretly inside the burned Viking ship as a really weird time capsule. Lorange put a letter into the bottle, his business card, and 5 coins. The letter itself was his interpretation of the site. He talked about Viking warriors, burial rituals, weapons, and shields. Though he failed to mention the dig's most impressive artifact, an 8th century Irish bronze vessel, likely looted from a monastery by bloodthirsty Vikings. Lorange also had a flair for romance. At the bottom of the letter, he left a message in Nordic runes, declaring his love in an ancient alphabet. Only Lorange wasn't very proficient in runes, so he wrote the most confusing love note in history. Instead of crafting a poetic, mysterious message, he used the runic alphabet to phonetically spell out a garbled, pseudo-ancient love note that said, "Emma Gade, my girlfriend." Emma may have never even seen it, but she did marry Lorange in 1877. In 1939, researchers excavating another one of Lorange's sites at Raknehaugen found a different hidden message, this one written to a different woman. Wow. This other letter was dedicated to Ingeborg Heftje, who married someone else, clearly. How many women was Anders Lorange writing love notes to? And why stash them at ancient Viking sites? His message in a bottle was found by Morten Ramstad and his team 150 years later, when they recently re-excavated Myklebust. The University of Bergen's archaeologists have handed over their findings to the Bergen Museum, who will display the love letter, coins, and glass bottle in 2025 as part of the museum's 200th anniversary celebration. Even serious archaeologists can't resist a dramatic flourish or a cringeworthy love confession. The secret history of gibbeting. Let's talk Turkey. Let's talk torture. Ever heard of gibbeting? If you thought medieval torture devices were the peak of human cruelty, think again. Imagine being convicted of a crime, hanged until you're almost dead, and just when you think it's all over and you can relax in the afterlife, your remains are locked in a metal cage and you're left hanging like some gruesome roadside attraction. That's gibbeting in a nutshell. A punishment so extra it made sure people talked about you long after you stopped talking. Gibbeting seems like something from the Dark Ages, but it peaked in England in the 1700s. The justice system decided that public executions weren't making enough of a statement. Geez, how much more of a statement can you make than hanging a guy on a stage in front of a crowd? I'd like to introduce you to a gibbeting victim. His name was Parr from Banbury, Oxfordshire. I don't know his first name, but I do know that in 1746, he was hanged, locked in a human-shaped cage, and left to rot by the roadside, 1100s style. That road today is called Old Parr Road, and it's surprisingly charming considering it was named after a gibbeting victim. Sarah Tarlow is an archaeologist and gibbeting expert. I'm sure she has a compelling story about how she got involved in such work, but that's for another day. Sarah has studied the remaining gibbet cages across England, 16 of them, in case you were wondering how many of these historical nightmares still exist. According to her, these creepy contraptions were custom-made for each criminal, meaning some poor blacksmith had to take measurements of a corpse before crafting their eternal metal prison. It also means that no two gibbets were alike. Some were built to hold only the torso, leaving arms and legs free to dangle in the wind. Now that's a scarecrow that would scare away the bravest of crows. Others had features like a nose notch, I guess for comfort. In one case, a gibbet was reinforced with 12,000 nails just to keep people from tearing it down. The townsfolk really hated walking outside in the morning and smelling a rotting body. Women were not subjected to this bizarre form of post-mortem torture, not because women were beloved by society, but because their bodies fetched a high price for medical dissection. Their remains were typically sent straight to surgeons, regardless of what kinds of crimes they committed. The whole point of gibbeting was to deter crime, but it didn't work. In fact, people committed new crimes at gibbet sites. One of the most shocking stories involves a 16-year-old girl who invited her friend to a picnic under a gibbet. What a lovely place for some bread and cheese, right up Wednesday Addams' alley. Then the girl poisoned her friend, allegedly because she was jealous of her new job. She committed a crime right under the very thing meant to scare her to not do it. The irony is almost too much. By the 1830s, gibbeting had become less of a crime deterrent and more of a morbid inconvenience. In 1832, 2 criminals were sentenced to be gibbeted, and the public responded not with cheers, but with chaos, by blocking roads, overwhelming law enforcement, and proving that people had finally lost their enthusiasm for corpses in the streets. 2 years later, in 1834, gibbeting was officially abolished. The footprints rewriting history. Ancient footprints discovered in the UK just threw a wrench into everything scientists thought they knew about early humans. Something as simple as footprints are changing everything. You'll be blown away by just how old they are. Not quite dinosaur old, but close. These mysterious footprints are believed to belong to a group of adults and children who lived in England 800,000 years ago. That was long before humans were even human. The incredible find took place in Norfolk, and it wasn't even a planned excavation. Dr. Nick Ashton of the British Museum described the moment he and his team first spotted the prints. He said, "At first we weren't sure what we were seeing, but as we removed any remaining beach sand and sponged off the seawater, it was clear that the hollows resembled prints, perhaps human footprints." In other words, Dr. Nick and his team stumbled upon what might be the oldest known footprints outside of Africa, and possibly the earliest evidence of human life in northern Europe. Archaeologists recorded the prints using photogrammetry, taking super precise photos to analyze and measure before the sea could wash away the prints. This technique helped confirm that the elongated hollows were indeed footprints from early humans trekking across the region just shy of 1 million years ago. Okay, but who were these early humans? Were they Bigfoot? It could have been Homo heidelbergensis, maybe Homo erectus, or some other early human that we don't even know about yet. Further analysis revealed that the prints belonged to a group of up to 5 individuals. Dr. Isabel de Groot from Liverpool John Moores University explained that foot length is typically about 15% of a person's height. Using that as a baseline, researchers estimated that the people who left the prints ranged in height from about 3 feet to over 5.5 feet. The group was a mix of adults and children, probably a migrating family. Researchers determined the age of the prints by analyzing their geological position beneath the glacial deposits that form the cliffs. The site also contains remains of extinct animals, ancient plants, beetles, and shells. It's nature's own time capsule. By reconstructing the environment and matching it with known prehistoric landscapes, scientists confirm the footprints are, in fact, ancient. As for what this means for the history books, it's not clear yet. This discovery challenges the timeline of when humans first arrived in northern Europe. Mainstream archaeologists had no idea that people had made it as far north as Britain this early. 800,000 years ago, Britain was still connected to mainland Europe by land, meaning these early humans could have wandered over from what is now France or Belgium. But just imagine what life was like for them. Where were they going? Where did they come from? Why did they pick up and leave? Let me know your thoughts. A golden shipwreck in the African desert. You would expect to find a shipwreck at the bottom of the ocean, right? Well, how about finding one buried in a desert? That's exactly what happened when diamond miners in Namibia stumbled upon one of the most valuable shipwrecks ever found, the Bom Jesus. It was a Portuguese vessel that vanished with a cargo hold stuffed full of gold, copper, and ivory. On March 7, 1533, the Bom Jesus set sail from Lisbon, Portugal, bound for India. Somewhere along the way, it ran into a catastrophic storm and disappeared. No one knew its fate until, in 2008, diamond miners working for De Beers drained a man-made lagoon and found something even shinier than diamonds. It was a 500-year-old shipwreck still packed with its cargo of about $13 million in treasure. Dr. Dieter Nolli, chief archaeologist of the Southern Africa Institute of Maritime Archaeological Research, had predicted this moment for years. When he finally got the call that the Bom Jesus was found, he rushed to the site. I mean, wouldn't you? Dr. Nolli and other archaeologists dug up thousands of Spanish and Portuguese gold coins, silver coins, bronze cannons, tons of copper ingots, elephant tusks, navigational instruments, muskets, cooking utensils. I could go on all day. The cargo list was the medieval equivalent of winning the lottery. But hold on a sec. How did a ship bound for India end up buried under African sand? Experts believe the Bom Jesus got pulled too close to shore during a violent storm, where it smashed into a rock and capsized. Over the following centuries, the coastline water slowly receded, leaving the ship high and dry in the desert. And I thought the sea level was rising. After 500 years, the ship had gone from the bottom of the sea to the top of the sand, and then to the bottom of the sand. So, did the miners who found the treasure get to keep even a single coin? Nope, not even one. The Namibian government took ownership of every single piece of treasure and shook out every miner's pockets to make sure they weren't missing even one piece. Almost 20 years after its discovery, the Bom Jesus remains the oldest and most valuable shipwreck ever found in sub-Saharan Africa. To be honest, it's unlikely another find like this will ever see the light of day, so we'd better enjoy it.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Secrets under Rome. The Santa Priscilla Catacombs is a mysterious underground labyrinth of ancient burial chambers that can be found beneath the streets of Rome, and many don't even know it exists. Professional archaeologists began to investigate the catacombs at the end of the 19th century. They were initially hoping to find treasure, but instead found a total disaster. The marble sarcophagi that had once held bodies of Romans were shattered into pieces. Beautiful mosaics had been torn right off the walls, altars dismantled, and entire skeletons were found with their bones ripped apart. This plundering had been carried out 200 years earlier, and guess who ordered the catacombs to be destroyed? It was the Vatican. In the middle of the 17th century, Pope Innocent X sent tomb raiders down into the depths of the catacombs for either one of two reasons. Some say the Pope had either been searching for lost treasure or had purposely ordered the cemeteries to be destroyed because the church believed they were cursed. Historians can't agree on which was correct. But here's what makes this story so much more interesting. There is a part of the catacombs called the Capella Greca. It's a Greek chapel with faded frescoes on the wall featuring women instead of men. Almost nowhere else in the ancient world can so many frescoes be seen showing women apparently leading a religious mass. In other words, acting as priests. While most of the chapel has been destroyed, many of these female priests can still be seen faded on the walls of these hidden catacombs. Most experts believe it was the Vatican who ordered the whole place destroyed to keep this part of history a secret. Giorgio Otranto, professor of ancient Christian history, says that women did serve as priests in the early days and it was fairly widespread. Papal letters, ancient writings, and inscriptions on burial vaults like the ones in the catacombs of Rome prove that women were serving as priestesses. However, the church then decided that it would be forbidden and tried to stamp out all evidence that this ever happened. Nushabad Underground City. The Nushabad underground city was a very advanced subterranean metropolis that was used 1,500 years ago. The below-ground city is 3 stories and was once used by the ancient Persians to seek refuge in times of war. The city is sprawled underneath the city above ground with the same name, which can get kind of confusing. Despite its immense scale and long history, nobody even knew about this place until about 10 years ago. That was when a man broke through one of the walls of the ancient city while he was digging a sewage ditch. Archaeologists arrived to map the enormous underground city. It's about 60 feet deep, and there's tunnels, chambers, staircases, and even booby traps. This is now considered one of the greatest marvels in ancient engineering. It was almost like a hotel with hallways and rooms with their own water pipes, storage spaces, and even toilets. It's believed that construction began during the Neo-Persian Empire, sometime between 224 and 651. The secret city likely began as a spattering of underground chambers where women, children, and elderly people could hide whenever the city was attacked. But as these chambers grew larger and water pipes and air ducts were installed, it became a real city that was fully sustainable. It's hard to say when exactly it was abandoned, but it may have been used up until the 20th century. Parts of the city are actually open to tourists, so you can go visit for yourself. Elmina Castle. The town of Elmina, located on the coast of Ghana, has a dark secret. The secret is held inside Elmina Castle, a massive structure built during medieval times. It's actually still the biggest European building ever built in tropical Africa. It's a picturesque place and looks like a resort on the edge of a sandy beach surrounded by tropical palm trees. But don't let that fool you. Elmina Castle was the last place thousands of native Africans saw their homeland before they were put in slave ships, never to return. The terrifying truth is that Elmina and the surrounding area had about 30 slave forts, built all along the coast by Europeans who came to sub-Saharan Africa in the 15th century to get slaves. This was a place of torture and death. The Portuguese, English, Swedish, Dutch, and Danish built these forts from between 1482 and 1786. The original purpose of the castle was to be an outpost, a place where ship captains could anchor their vessels in a secure harbor. This was a time of piracy, and when the European empires often attacked each other on the high seas. The best defense was to hide near a fortress that could shoot at any potential pirates using cannons. At first, the whole region was home to the gold trade. It wasn't until around 1637, after the Dutch conquered the castle, that it became used as a base for the slave trade. The Dutch used this castle as a kind of loading yard for human cargo, which they then shipped to the Americas through the Caribbean. About 30,000 slaves a year passed through Elmina Castle up until 1814, when the Dutch abolished the trade. The lost civilization of China. 5,300 years ago, a mysterious civilization appeared seemingly out of nowhere in eastern China. They built settlements that were highly advanced for the time, great shining cities the likes of which had never been seen throughout the world. The Liangshu culture first appeared along the banks of the Yangtze River Delta. Researchers believe their greatest city of them all was Liangshu City, built during the Stone Age. Its ruins are still there today beside the river, although they've been horribly eroded by time and the elements. Archaeologists have found evidence of extreme technological advancements, inventions of agriculture and aquaculture, and signs of a complex social society. In fact, researchers have called this mysterious city the Neolithic Venice of the East because some of their architectural features seem to support hydraulic engineering. Things like canals, water reservoirs, and dams used to keep the food growing and the population booming. Here's where things get really strange. For about 1,000 years, the culture progressed with miraculous speed. Then, around 4,300 years ago, this city was abandoned overnight, and nobody knows why. Of course, there are theories. Geologist Christoph Spottel from the University of Innsbruck says it could have had something to do with a great flood. A thin layer of clay was found preserved over the ruins, which means the flood may have been so bad that the city and its people were completely buried in a thick layer of muck. Ancient Ukrainian pyramid. Archaeologists recently unearthed something in Ukraine that's a little unbelievable. They found the remains of an ancient pyramid that predates the Egyptian pyramids by at least 300 years. This mysterious pyramid was found near the city of Lugansk in the east. According to the head of excavations, Viktor Klochko, this is the first evidence of any kind of pyramid monument in Eastern Europe, and it could actually change the current understanding of social structures in this part of Europe and what we thought we knew about the development of farmers and cattle herders into complex societies. Based on the evidence at the site, the pyramid was built 5,000 years ago during the Bronze Age by an early cult of sun worshippers. The pyramid was part of a larger complex, a kind of religious city focused on worshipping the sun. There were temples, altars for sacrifices, and homes for the people who lived nearby. Archaeologists have even found the graves of the sacrifice victims. What made this particular cult so horrifying is that they didn't simply cut their victims' throat, they burned them alive. We don't know how many more of these ancient religious cities might be around, but considering this pagan cult was in operation for about 2,000 years, there could be lots of them. It's just that they've all been destroyed or their ruins are buried under modern city streets. The erotic art of Pompeii. There is a rather unusual secret in the ancient Roman city of Pompeii that not many people know about. It's not a building or a temple or a cave. The secret is that for some unknown reason, there is an obscene amount of erotic art scattered throughout Pompeii. Once you start looking around, you can see it's everywhere. Pompeii was a Roman city built in the shadow of the great Mount Vesuvius. When it erupted in the year 79, it blanketed the city in hot ash and killed pretty much everything. The entire city, as well as its dead residents, were then trapped in stone. In the 19th century, archaeologists started excavating Pompeii. Almost immediately, they started finding erotic examples of artwork, couples in the midst of copulation, nude sculptures, and images of gods with some rather gratuitous body parts. Since this kind of thing was considered shameful at the time of the discoveries, most of it was swept under the rug and kept from the general public. It wasn't until 2000 that many of these images and statues were finally revealed. Otherwise, it was too scandalous. What historians want to know is why the Romans were so obsessed with the erotic. It's almost like half of their artwork involved adult themes. According to expert Maria Luisa Catoni, the answer isn't that complicated. She says that Pompeii's lewd obsession wasn't considered lewd in the Roman world. Before Christianity, these kinds of things were normal. In fact, people even celebrated the naked body and eroticism, rather than try to suppress it. The secret excavation of Jerusalem. One of the strangest digs in history was the secret excavation of Jerusalem. It all started in 1909 when the British aristocrat Montague Brownlow Parker put together a team of other scholarly types who had no training in archaeology at all. They went to Jerusalem at a time when the Ottoman Empire was still in control of the region. What they were hoping to find was the famous Ark of the Covenant, or King Solomon's treasure from 3,000 years ago. Parker paid 500 British pounds, which equals about $80,000 in today's money, and made a secret deal with Ottoman officials to split whatever loot he found. They first arrived in the Palestinian port of Jaffa, but were slightly delayed because of outbreak of the plague. Finally, they made it to Jerusalem. Their intention was to dig on the slope of Temple Mount, a place where no archaeological digging is allowed. This is a holy site for Jews, Christians, and Muslims. But it's been managed by the Muslim community ever since the days of the Crusades. For nearly 800 years, no one had been allowed to mess around with the Temple Mount. But these aristocrats managed to bribe their way in, get rid of the guards, and dig passages underneath for 9 days straight. Still, they couldn't find the Ark of the Covenant. They finally went into an even holier place, a cave called the Mosque of Omar, near where Muhammad supposedly ascended to heaven. But as they were digging, they created too much noise, and the locals were alerted to what was happening. A mob gathered and the foreigners were forced to flee for their lives, and that concluded their dig. To this day, we still don't know if the Ark is buried under Temple Mount. The skyscrapers of Sana'a. Sana'a is the largest city in modern Yemen and one of the highest capital cities in the world, at an elevation of 7,500 feet. While the new city might be a modern metropolis, the old city of Sana'a is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's most famous for its towering skyscrapers, incredibly tall buildings that were made thousands of years ago, at a time when most civilizations were building huts and single-story buildings out of rock. These soaring constructions are unlike anything found elsewhere in the ancient world. UNESCO says they were most likely built beginning in the 8th century, although the actual dating has proved next to impossible. Because the structures were built from mud brick, they have needed to be constantly renovated as time goes on. This has made any actual dating extremely difficult. However, medieval texts do say that the Great Gumdam Palace was built in the 3rd century BC and was 20 stories tall. That means that 2,300 years ago, the seat of Yemen's ancient rulers was literally in a skyscraper. Secret neighborhood beneath Athens. A secret neighborhood has been discovered underneath the Acropolis in Athens. This mysterious neighborhood was built long before the Parthenon ever stood on the Acropolis hill. It was most likely part of the original human settlement in what became Athens way back around 3500 BC. This was when the settlement really started to grow, with everything from workshops to houses and even cemeteries coexisting. This area probably started being used as a residential neighborhood much later, around the 8th century BC, up until the 5th century BC. In the 5th century, something drastic happened. The area was paved over and integrated into the walled city of Athens. We don't know what happened to the people who lived here, if they left peacefully or were forced out of their homes. Whatever the case was, the entire area was covered up and erased. Not many years later, the Parthenon and the other grandiose buildings of the Acropolis were built on top. The secret ancient city of Sayedra. The ancient city of Sayedra in Turkey dates back to the 3rd century BC, and even though the town stayed alive until the 13th century, its most glorious time came around in 200 AD, when walls were built around it. They had clean water, ancient temples, great workshops, and even a mysterious cave where Christians performed baptisms in the early days of the religion. Even after all these years, many of the original buildings still survive, examples of ancient Roman and Byzantine architecture that have weathered the centuries, thanks to expert building techniques on behalf of the residents. But what's even more intriguing is that there is an even more ancient city hiding underneath this one. In 2020, archaeologists uncovered ceramics dating way back to the 9th century BC. That's the Iron Age. These artifacts suggest there was a city here even before the Romans arrived and paved over it with their own city streets. Thanks for watching! Which mysterious city of the ancient world fascinates you the most? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. See you later! Bye!